Welcome, everybody. Once again, we are live with SolGold. I'm Bruce Tatters, CEO of Red Cloud, and very pleased to bring, once again, from all corners of the world, the SolGold management team today. SolGold is one of the premier exploration and development companies in the capital markets today. It's first mover advantage in Ecuador. The company is focused on the discovery and definition of world-class copper gold deposits. The most advanced one, Alpala, hosts one of the largest copper gold porphyries in the world today. On May 11th, SolGold made a major financing announcement with a royalty funding package from Franco-Nevada for its Alpala project. I'm joined here today by several senior members of the executive team at SolGold. Nick Mather, CEO, Ingo Hofmeier, GM, Project and Corporate Finance, Jason Ward, Executive Director, Exploration, and Eduardo Venezuela, Study Manager. After the presentation from the company, there will be a question and answer period. Everybody listening on the broadcast may type a question to the company, and as always, I will do my best to get to them. I don't believe it's going to be a long presentation. Nick, do you have a few words to begin the webcast?
I do. Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you very much to everybody who's joined the webinar to hear about the latest developments and the plans in front of us at SolGold. And at SolGold, we have identified a 700-kilometre long parallel series of metallogenic belts that form in Chile and to the north in Colombia, the Andean Copper Belt. It's largely unexplored in Ecuador, and we have some 15 projects that we have under our tenure, and the first of the discoveries there we own 85% of, and that's Alpala. The preliminary economic analysis of Alpala showed a net present value of some $4.3 billion US at the PEA prices of $3.30 a pound for copper and $1,300 an ounce for gold. Obviously, gold is significantly higher now. Copper has been down, but is rapidly coming up, and we can see a huge upside for the value of Alpala, notwithstanding that our market capitalization is significantly lower than the project value, which offers our shareholders opportunity for tremendous share price and market capitalization growth as the various risks that are perceived with Alpala get eroded by the studies that we're undertaking, the pre-feasibility study and the definitive feasibility study, and the rapidly evaporating concerns about Ecuador and the future of the copper market. So with interest rates around the world lower for longer, and probably certainly for the rest of my long life, we're going to be enjoying low interest rates. Debt funding these things is a fantastic way to go. And in Franco-Nevada, we were able to identify a source of funding that could see the long-term potential of the project, the upside for the gold price, and was prepared to go into a deal with us that ascribed the cost of their capital to the value of our project rather than just our market capitalization. So it was a better way for us to go from a funding point of view up to the end of the feasibility studies, and way less dilutive than had we just pumped out a whole lot of cheap shares, which is of course the way some shareholders may have liked to have seen us go. So I'm a shareholder of this company myself. I've got a lot of my own personal capital invested in it. I'm here for shareholders, and I'm here to see us turn SolGold into a major copper gold mining company, and one which can be as important to Ecuador as BHP was to the emergence of Australia as a global resource powerhouse. We believe that we can be instrumental in the transformation of Ecuador into one of the most important copper producing nations on earth, and that's what we're striving to achieve. And Franco-Nevada is certainly come on board with us in that endeavour at the early stages of the project. And we've got a lot further to go. Ingo Hofmar, our GM of Corporate and Project Finance, who you'll hear from later on some of the specific questions, has been working very diligently on generating a number of debt and metal stream related financing deals, which we believe can so far deliver around about $2 billion of the $2.7 billion that we have lined up for the prognosed capital development costs for this project. So we're looking at building a state-of-the-art block cave mine, one that the design that we put in place now will coincide with reality in terms of world's best practice mining development technologies in around about 3 years' time. And on the current schedule, we're hoping to go into early stage development sometime late in 2025. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge there, and consequently what we are doing is running all of the component elements of the pre-feasibility study in parallel. So permitting, early stage discussions with the government on the fiscal package, negotiations, all of the infrastructure, metallurgy, crushing and milling studies. It's all happening in parallel, and that's going to mean that we can deliver these studies and the outcomes from them considerably quicker than most people traditionally would be able to. Time is money, as they say in this business. I want to make sure that I can see this project developed as rapidly as possible, and that's why we're running these processes all in parallel. So our current strategy is to have the pre-feasibility study completed by the 30th of September 2020, that's this year, and the definitive feasibility study completed by 30 June in 2021. At the same time, we're working on the financing avenues, and we hope soon after the middle of next year to be able to put the financing in place, tick the boxes off on the permitting and the fiscal packages, and that will bring conditional financing package that we're working on at the moment to an unconditional stage, and we should have a development in principle in front of us. So very exciting time for SolGold. The presence of both BHP and Newcrest on our share register endorses the quality of the project, the skills of the management team, and the comfort that they have in Ecuador as a sovereign destination for the investment of exploration and mining capital. The world's capital markets are getting more and more comfortable with this, and we're glad to see that Franco has taken the step to put $100 million pursuant to the agreement and subject to some closing conditions to work with the Alpala project. The very exciting thing for us is that the geology of Alpala, we believe, is replicatable all through the 700-kilometre long strike length and of the country, and that is giving us rich ore bodies and ones that have a very high gold endowment, especially in their cores. Accordingly, the cash flow profiles that we can model from Alpala, we believe, will ultimately replicate from some of the other discoveries that we believe we will inevitably make, and this will mean that each successive development in SolGold will be easier and easier to fund, and eventually one dreams of a situation where we would be able to go on funding these things internally, and therefore create a major and create a major copper producing nation. So our relationship with Ecuador is definitely a symbiotic one. We put a lot of effort into our relationships with the government at all levels, federal, regional, local governments, and then of course right down to family units and individuals. We see community at every scale in Ecuador is something that we need to get endorsement from, and we work very hard at that. So having a social license to operate for us is something that we put a lot of real time and effort into. It's not just a milky catch cry that that you hear lots of companies refer to, but very few of them practice. We like to think we're different, and we believe that we're gaining a lot of international recognition, especially from financiers and institutional funds who are taking some notice of the way we do things, the speed with which we make our achievements, and the results that we're getting from those achievements. So again, thank you all very much for coming to hear us talk once again. We're going to do these webinars quite frequently. It's a very efficient way of keeping the market updated and addressing people's specific concerns. Our market capitalization at the moment of around about $750 million US pales beside the rapidly solidifying value of just Alpala, and we've got 14 of them lined up through the country. There's a big future for SolGold, and I really hope that that you're all on board for this very exciting ride. So thank you very much, Bruce, and without further ado, I'll hand over to you to chair the questions.
Terrific. Thank you, Nick. First one, obtaining permits has been an ongoing issue in recent years. Do you see the situation easing in the near term? It would seem imperative that some of these things need sorting before the turmoil of the next year's elections.
Yeah, we do see it easing. The government, as I say, driven largely by the economic imperatives, are putting a lot of effort into making sure that these processes are streamlined. I'm going to hand over to my co-executive Jason Ward, who's in charge of the project in Ecuador to and all of our Ecuadorian activities to deal with that question in detail. Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, basically, I agree. We have shared interests, the Ecuador government and SolGold. We need to get things happening as fast as possible. There has been a change of the mines minister recently. I will say on the permits, even though they were slow, they were never stalled. There is a process in place. We've had biological checks, botanists come in, we do water checks. So there's a process we work through in all of the permits. We've got three projects ready to drill, that being Blanca, La Hueca and Porvenir. And we saw how they work through several steps, up to 16 steps. We can see other projects working through the steps, so we can see things moving. Although it seems slow when you're an investor waiting to hear news, internally we can see things moving along, and I expect multiple permits to be granted before the end of this year.
Thanks, Jason. Bruce?
Thanks, Jason. Sorry about that. I was muted. In a recent interview, Nick indicated that he and the other board members were not in a position to buy shares due to their possession of sensitive information. Is this still the case, or can they now buy shares?
It is still the case. We hope to be freed up in the near future, but right at the moment we can't.
Okay. Next one. I noticed that you have received some drilling permits for some of the other prospects. Do you have sufficient funds to pay for drilling that is permitted? And if not, how are you proposing to fund any future drilling campaigns?
I'm going to hand over to our GM Corporate Finance, Inga Hofmeier, to deal with the answer to that question. It's not a fix all in one hit. issue. It's something that we are progressively addressing. Ingo?
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and thank you everyone for joining. I guess just a couple of comments before we go back to that question. I am based in London, as many know, and we get a lot of feedback from investors. We really appreciate this. I want to take the opportunity to thank our investors and encourage them to stay in touch with us. We read your feedback, and if there's some commercial value in it, we are definitely following up on this with our either advisors or directly with our contacts. With regards to the budgeting question, I think we have always been very clear what the budget is. We had a release out on the 11th of March that it's in total 150 million. Obviously, the one for the exploration budget is depending on when we get access, and this is not only depending on what Jason has just said, it's also depending on COVID restrictions that we adhere to with the local communities. We have a carve out for some of the funds from what we have received from Franco-Nevada for local exploration, and we will use that money wisely.
Thanks, Ingo. Next question. In the latest presentation, it states that on page 16 that SolGold is bidding for Cornerstone. This appears to be a definitive statement. So can investors please be updated with as much information as possible regarding the details, status, and process of this action?
Yeah, we are bidding for Cornerstone. We are still preparing documentation. The documentation changes with each development in the company. We are proceeding with it, and it is in preparation and revision. And we continue to maintain that the best thing for all interests in Alpala is to consolidate it under the SolGold roof. The advantages to Cornerstone shareholders include a significant premium being offered by SolGold, cost savings, and of course the Cornerstone shareholders will also therefore get to take part as SolGold shareholders in the very exciting exploration pipeline that we have in front of us. And then, of course, last but very much not least, is the risk of financing and massive dilution in the Cornerstone share register by having to go and raise their share of the likely development funding for Alpala will be avoided as Cornerstone shareholders become SolGold shareholders. So there's 4 very compelling reasons why we believe that Cornerstone shareholders should be not only availing themselves of the offer from SolGold that will be formally made in the very near future, but they should be encouraging their company's board and management to recommend this very high premium proposal that SolGold is making. So it is coming. We have had a lot of changes along the way and a number of challenges to overcome, but it is coming.
Thanks, Nick. Next question. In their latest presentation, it states on page 29 that there are 3 drill permits approved. Does this mean that the company is now free to drill without further restriction, subject to the terms of the permits? To which concession areas do the drilling permits relate? And when does the company anticipate the beginning of drilling?
I'm going to hand over to Jason Ward to deal with the specific answers to those questions. And Jason, you might also give us a little update on where we see the regional exploration programs taking us.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I answered that earlier. Blanca, Porvenir, and La Hueca. They're the 3 permits that everything's approved there, including the water permit, which is the has been the slowest one. Porvenir is a fantastic target. We've got a much bigger outcrop than what we had at Alpala there, but it's copper and gold rich. It has a similar copper gold ratio to Alpala, so we're really excited about that. We've been mobilising drill rigs up there prior to the COVID pandemic. We were setting up camps, mobilising drill rigs, so we are getting ready to drill there. Laweka, we have ready. Similar case, we're building a camp and getting things ready to drill there. There's some other projects that my ranking of the projects always changes depending on data and new discoveries. Selene is looking like a fantastic discovery, really big, really good grades. Chakal, we've found 2 porphyry systems there, as well as an epithermal system. And Rio Amarillo, it's a massive lithocap. There's 4 lithocaps in the project, but one really massive one. It's got like a 1,500 metre difference in height from outcrops on the road to the top of the mountain. There's gold throughout it all. It's a massive system, so really pushing the permits there. But yeah, things will depend on when different communities open up, because different communities react differently to the COVID scare. Alpala is all good to go. Yeah, so we'll wait and see how things play out, which we actually drill first.
And it's important to note that all of this information is publicly available and has been announced in the past, but it fascinates us that the opportunity for discovery on these projects goes largely unnoticed, and I would like to remind people of what Alpala meant to the average investor in the street before we made the discovery there, and the answer is not much. So don't discount that we could find something on a 100% owned basis in one of these other project areas, and it could be every bit as good as Alpala.
Thanks, Nick. Next question.
I seem to have lost. Can you still see me?
We still see you, Nick. You're still on there. We can still hear you. Not to worry. Next question.
I can't see anyone, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
When you released the Alpala PEA 12 months ago, the PFS and DFS were expected to be completed as at December 2019 and December 2020, respectively. What are your current expectations for the respective completion dates, and how confident are you of these?
Yeah, I seem to have lost you. As long as you can still see and hear me, that's good. I can't see anyone else on the screen, but which is a little disconcerting. But we're still expecting the completion of the PFS at the end of September and the completion of the DFS at the end of June next year. I'm going to hand over to Eduardo Valenzuela, our study manager, to provide you with some details around that. Eduardo?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, basically we have been collecting all the required field data. And on that, one thing we have been endeavoring to do with some success up until the interruption due to the COVID is that we've been collecting enough data not only for the PFS but also for the DFS. And an example of that is that we have now, for example, completed enough geological drilling and delineated enough measured and indicated resources in MRE3 that was recently published to support a DFS. So we have been in some way delaying a bit the PFS, but trying to bring forward the DFS. As you know, this is probably one of the top 3 large-scale ore bodies in the world that will be mined as a block cave. Now that requires a significant amount of work. not only in the geological sense to prove up such a huge resource. As you know, we are up to 2.6 billion tons of ore. So it does require a significant amount of drilling, but also requires a significant amount of geotechnical knowledge, geotechnical drilling for that effect, and in association to that is hydrogeology, and in addition to that, of course, is the infrastructure and material handling side of it. So although we are blessed in many ways with very accessible infrastructure, for example, in terms of water supply, in terms of power supply, in terms of port facilities, but nevertheless, being the scale of the project that we're looking at, a 50 million ton per annum, that requires a lot of work, and not only from an engineering point of view, but also from a data gathering point of view. So, just confirming what Nick said, our plan, our aim, is to have that completed, the PFS, by the end of third quarter of this year, say end of September, and DFS by the end of the second quarter of next year, June 2021.
And the most important thing that sets us apart, I think, other than the quality of the ore body, is that we're doing all of the studies that are going into the PFS to DFS standards. So we're being very careful to avoid having to replicate studies and the collection of data as we move forward into each successive new stage for the project.
That's
Terrific,
right.
guys. That segues nicely into the next question. In light of the slight timetable slippage, have you considered skipping the PFS publication and going straight to a DFS publication, effectively producing a combined PFS DFS? This was common with many majors back in the 2010 to 12 period. What, if any, impact are the study delays expected to have on the overall project timeline?
It won't have any delay at all, because we move seamlessly from the PFS stage to the DFS stage. The PFS is effectively an interim report on the ultimate DFS objective. So we don't expect any delays. In fact, we think that having them run as effectively one project with separate reporting times will actually speed things up. Again, Eduardo, would you care to provide some detail in our response?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think you explained that very well. But all I can say in addition to that is that we expect that the PFS in no way or form will slow us down in progressing the DFS. Again, the reason is that because we have been collecting all the data and will continue to do it with the DFS in mind, not only with the PFS, but with the DFS in mind, we will be, as Nick indicated, will be a seamless transition between PFS and DFS. But also, I think it is important to have reporting milestones along the way to keep the market informed, but also for regulatory purposes. But in reality, again, preparation of the PFS report should not slow us down in progressing the DFS in any way or form.
Yeah, you raise a very good point, Eduardo. It is very important for us to keep shareholders informed along the way about how the project definition is evolving. And it's also very important for us to show the government how the project definition is evolving. That's as much as any protocol why we need to have a PFS along the route to the DFS. And the other really important factor is it enables us to start sculpting and shaping the sort of financing deals that we need to put in place, hopefully to marry up with the evaporation or satisfaction of conditions around about the same time as the DFS is delivered. So having an interim reporting stage in the PFS along the way very much helps the process of parallel negotiation of conditional financing packages, fiscal frameworks with the government, and the various permitting routes that we need to go down. If we just waited for the completion of one BFS at the end, then we would have to start all that stuff about a year from now, whereas by working to a PFS interim report, we can start working on it much sooner. Bruce?
Thanks, Nick. Next question. Backing out the studies budget from the comments made in the news release about the current and expected Cornerstone debt, are you budgeting 77 million from today to reach DFS? Is that correct? How much of that is for completion of the PFS versus for the DFS period, excuse me.
I'm going to hand over to Ingo Hofmeyr, our Chief of Corporate and Project Finance, to answer that.
Yeah, Bruce, a good question. I think what we have said in the release regarding Franco-Nevada is that roughly $20 million, is this the number that you had there, will be spent or will be credited to the debt account of Cornerstone?
Yeah, it said 77 million in the question, Ingo.
77 million in the question. I mean, I can only imagine that someone has inferred from what we have indicated will be added to the debt carried account of Cornerstone. The background is the following, that Cornerstone is currently carried by us. That means once a feasibility study has been delivered by us, they need to start contributing to the further study work, operating costs of ENSA, which owns Alpala, and then ultimately to the development expenses. Their share is 15%. So I assume what someone has done is difference in the release. And if I just check this currently, I think this was around somewhere 22 million or so, and 15% of that is rather closer to 150 million. And that is aligned with what we have always stated, that the development from now to final feasibility study will cost. In terms of the breakup between the pre-feasibility and the full feasibility, it's roughly one quarter, so 25% to 75%. So because work has already been done on the PFS, there is far less expenses on the PFS.
Terrific. Thank you, Ingo.
Yeah.
The next question, and you might want to stay on, Ingo. The US 15 million advance on the 100 million made on Tuesday under the BLA suggests SolGold's cash balance was running low, less than 4 months left. Can you comment on where your cash balance is now with the latest injection? Yeah,
I mean, we have just recently announced our MD&A, which we do every quarter. So the cash balance is in there. It's around 4 million. It was around 4 million by the end of last month, and 15 million have in the meantime come in. So I think there's the cash balance. With regards to our spending, we obviously spend currently a lot less than what we intended to spend, which is mainly a function of reduced travel and a function of reduced accessibility for the main projects. So from that perspective, we have currently significant runway in terms of the months going forward. And we are quite confident that this money will be sufficient until we can complete the key condition precedent for the Franco-Nevada deal. The condition there is a final confirmatory due diligence, and that's basically a site visit. So several elements that we want to get through. The airport in Quito is opening up on the 1st of June for commercial flights, and we have been speaking to various government agencies, how we can arrange this, and obviously to Franco-Nevada itself. The safety of our visitors and our employees is very important, and of course, how we do the interactions with the communities is quite key. So there's no set date yet, but we are monitoring this closely and discussing this regularly with Franco-Nevada.
Thanks, Ingo. Next question. Can you remind us of the other royalties, profit shares, and taxes the project will be subject to, aside from the new 1 to 1.5% NSR, 0.5 to 0.75 if the buyback right is exercised, and any future gold stream you might decide to sign up to?
Yeah. Nick, do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I will, and I may refer to you for some specifics, Ingo. But starting with the last element of the question first, no, we are not able to speculate about what we may or may not do in respect of any of the financing angles that we're working on, save what we have indicated we are working on, with the expectation of some level of success in recent announcements. So I'm sorry we can't go into any more detail on what else might be possible, but we have given the market as much guidance as possible in the recent announcements about what we're working on and what we reasonably think is achievable. And there was guidance also in the recent announcement about Franco-Nevada. So dealing with the first part of the question about the royalties, there's an existing royalty on the project which we can buy for some $4 million when the project reaches feasibility, and we'll be doing that. There's a potential 0.5% net smelter return royalty that may emerge on the project if Cornerstone do not contribute at least 10% to the costs of the project going forward, including CapEx following the delivery of the feasibility study. And then, of course, as has been modelled in the preliminary economic analysis, there are royalties to the Ecuadorian government of between 5 and 8% for gold and 3 and 5% for copper. Now, we have put in our PEA the maximums, 8% for gold and 5% for copper. So to add another potential $1.5 million for $150 million is not a big impost on the project, and it will probably be absorbed within the flex that there is in the Ecuadorian legislation for negotiating lower than maximum royalty rate. So while we have modelled the maximum possible royalty rate with the government, we can, under the laws there, go as low as 5 for gold and 3 for copper. So we've left ourselves a lot of room to negotiate reasonably, and given the size of this project, we would expect that the government will work constructively with us, as they've indicated and as they always have done, to make sure that this project can get off the ground with the maximum possible impact. It will be great for Ecuador, it'll be great for the rating of their sovereign bonds, and it will be obviously fantastic for SolGold shareholders. But the extra 1.5% or 1 to 1.5% royalty that we will be paying to Franco-Nevada is well within the margins of negotiation that we have available to us with the government in respect of both the copper royalty and the gold royalty. So no, we're not concerned about it at all. And it's important to note that that royalty is not payable until 2028 at the latest, and it's at that stage only $10 million a year as a minimum. So it's not a massive impost on the project.
Thanks, Nick. Next question. Aside from the site visit, what other CPs need to be satisfied for the Franco deal?
I'm going to again refer to the Oracle on the Franco deal in our company, Ingo. I might add this documentation is 150 pages long, and we refer to it as the Bible. Ingo is a scholar of the Bible, and I'll hand over to Ingo to answer questions about the CPs. Ingo?
Yeah, I think the important thing is what actually has already happened. So there was an extensive phase of due diligence over several months. That means access to the data room, calls with the teams. Both companies' boards have signed this transaction off. There's no further internal approval required. So the key thing really is what we call the final confirmatory due diligence, which is a site visit. It didn't happen because we had the interference of COVID restrictions. Otherwise, it's very customary, for instance, update of title opinions and similar documents that you would simply expect. It's a legal exercise that is very standard for transactions of this size. Nothing unusual here.
Thank you, guys. Next question. What will happen to the millions of options expiring soon?
They will expire unless they get exercised. They are, I think you're referring to the 60p options, unless there is a very massive re-rate in the share price. I can't see them being exercised. They're well out of the money.
Thanks, Nick. Next question. With the mining cadaster being opened in Q4 2020, what can we expect for SolGold? The annual report states we have 26 ungranted applications. Will these be forthcoming, and do you expect any of them, of the 7 to 8 priority areas that the Vice Minister has recently suggested, will be expedited prior to the national elections in 2021?
I think your question is more, do we expect that any of our areas will be included in that 7 or 8? Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we believe that they're very, very good areas. We can't tell what the minister's thinking, but we would like to think that that they saw that the effort that was put in by SolGold on Ecuador, the quality of our work, and the extensive nature of our exploration tenure would mean that if there was some regulatory avenue to ensure that that SolGold could get working on these project areas, then we would like to think that that was enacted. But look, I'm going to hand over to Jason Ward, who's across the detail on other tenement applications. And Jason, you might just explain what the difference is between very early stage applications and the applications that we have that are still registered on the cadastre, and what you can see as upside for these projects and when they might be granted.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's the tenement application process goes through different stages, and what the Vice Minister said was that those tenements which have the terms of reference granted will be granted. So terms of reference is just one of the stages of the application process. We have about 26 projects with the terms of reference granted. So any of those 26 could be granted. I will add, we have many more than 26 applications pending. We have some which don't have the terms of reference, so they're a bit behind. As far as the 7 projects the Vice Minister is talking about, high priority projects, I don't know what they are, and I'm not sure if the government have gone through the same process as SolGold have in identifying these projects. Some of our areas which we consider high priority now were lower priority before we got on the ground and did some initial field work. It's just so unexplored that, you know, one day can change between a medium priority project and a very high priority project when you find some spectacular outcrop, which seems to keep happening.
Thank you, guys. Next question. Why not hive off the remaining Ecuadorian projects into separate companies, separately funded, issuing shares to each existing shareholder? That would protect Cascabel from dilution.
This is a favourite topic of mine and one of my passions. One of the things that sets SolGold apart and makes it unique from nearly every other exploration company and aspiring developer and miner on the planet is that we have this spectacular pipeline of projects that can follow up behind Alpala. Not only is it a spectacular collection of projects and other exploration targets, but they're all in the same country. We can apply the same geological exploration principles. We can apply the same social principles, and we can apply the same operating protocol. That gives us a massive advantage over, say, a BHP or a Newcrest or someone who is exploring in theatres all over the world, where they've got to re-educate themselves about geology, operating procedures, political frameworks, social frameworks, etc., etc. We've done all that. We know what works at Alpala. We only need slight refinements all through the rest of the country, and it works seamlessly. That is a massive advantage. One of the reasons that a lot of people find SolGold attractive as an investment destination for their hard-earned dollars is because we have this unique character, and it makes SolGold a complete package. If we were to split the company apart, I don't think it would do anything for the government's view or regard of us, and we may well just be seen as cheap opportunists, which we're not. The government loves our stated and repeated objective of turning this company into Ecuador's BHP, and I don't intend to fracture that by going through spin-offs of arms and legs all over the place. The problem with spinning off arms and legs to your business is you end up with a body that has no mobility. We have great mobility, we have great flexibility, we are unique, and we intend to maintain that and not descend to an average standard by simply getting rid of assets which have massive upside. The upside in these other 14 projects is immense, and it's untested. Each one of them could deliver the same results as Alpala. Why on earth, as a SolGold shareholder, would you want that to happen?
Clearly, that's your passion, Nick. That was a great answer. Next question. Given the holdup in the bid for Cornerstone was related to there being undisclosed information which needed to be included in the bid, are you now in a position where a bid can be made?
We answered that before. The answer is that we are preparing and revising and preparing the documentation. We have always been of the view that we were proceeding with this bid, and nothing's changed. So for all the Cornerstone shareholders out there that are listening to this and very interested in the answer to that question, no, we are not going to abandon providing you with an opportunity to transform your Cornerstone shareholders into SolGold shareholders at a very large premium, thereby avoiding future financing risk and improving the economics and financeability on the project overall, but also participating in SolGold's other pipeline of very exciting porphyry copper gold projects. So opportunity is still there for you. We hope that common sense prevails and that you are given an opportunity to support SolGold's bid for Cornerstone.
Thanks, Nick. Next question. By going through the debt financing route, has it soured relations with the large shareholders? What does that mean for the relationship going forward?
I don't think it's soured the relationship. I think they're probably disappointed that we didn't go through this phase of funding by just pumping out cheap equity and pumping it out to them. But we're here to look after all shareholders, not just the largest ones. And the gap between the market capitalization and the indicative project value is so great that we would not be doing shareholders, we would not be doing all shareholders a service by continuing to fund the company on an equity only basis, and that is why we felt very compelled to do the Franco financing. There will be obviously equity funding opportunities down the track, but we were very keen to see the Franco deal or some of the other options that we were working on at the time come to fruition, because the value that is ascribed to the project is significantly higher. On a conditional basis, we're raising $100 million US for a 1% royalty in Alpala. Had we been raising $100 million in equity at that time, that would have been about 15% of the company. That's not a great comparison. Clearly, it makes way more sense to do that deal with Franco than just pump out cheap equity for the benefit of a few corporate and institutional shareholders.
Thanks, Nick. So with the risk of a little bit of repetition, people keep asking similar questions to this. So I'm gonna ask you this one, even though I believe you've answered it. Please, can you ask if they've considered JVing some of the regional projects, potentially less favorable ones, in order to advance them while remaining focused on Alpala, which will eventually fund the rest of the regional projects?
Again, last part of the question first. There is an enormous amount of time and effort spent on administering joint ventures. Luckily, the situation with Alpala is not a joint venture. It's our interest is held through 85% interest in the company that holds the project. But joint ventures can exhaust you, and they're also an extremely good way of giving away your upside. So an exploration project is something that attracts investors to your company, and it begs the question, why would you give that upside away in a joint venture? So no, joint venturing interests in the other exploration projects is not high on my agenda. If we apply the same sort of geological exploration techniques and mineralization models that were evident at and we discovered at Alpala, and we apply those to other project areas through the country, I have every confidence that we'll find some replicas of Alpala. At a couple of $1 billion a throw, no, I'm not interested in farming the opportunity for that sort of discovery out to major companies when we're quite capable of raising the money to do that early stage exploration work ourselves. These systems are so large that once you discover the tip of the iceberg sticking through the unaltered cover rocks around it, as was at Alpala, where we found a 50-metre intersection in Alpala Creek. That was what was evident at Alpala, and it had this massive iceberg underneath it with 3 billion tonnes of indicated and inferred resource on it. The same opportunity exists all through our tenement portfolio, and no, we're not interested in farming that out. We're interested in finding these ore bodies and adding value rapidly that way on those exploration targets.
Thanks, Nick. Next question. Are we likely to see future legal challenges to mining in Ecuador which could adversely impact SolGold?
I can't speculate on that question. The Ecuadorian constitution does provide an ability for people to object to mining or object to anything if they want. However, there are two very stiff filters that an objection has to get through before it can even be considered to become law. Firstly, it has to be properly formatted, and so far none of them have. And a key element of the formatting is addressing the question whether the proposal is constitutional or not. And if it's not constitutional, in other words, it doesn't address the provisions of the Constitution. One of them is that mining is something that is in the national interest, then it can't be considered. So a lot of the objectors to mining in Ecuador are sort of caught by this catch-22, where they can't demonstrate the constitutionality of their questions to even get to step one of being able to challenge the Constitution that does permit mining in the national interest. The second question, having established the constitutional nature of the question, is then to consider the material positives and negatives of the proposal. In a country with the economic characteristics of Ecuador, the overwhelming answer to that question is that banning mining is not at all in the national interest. And so we find that while it is academically possible to mount challenges, the practical reality of that is that very few, if any of them, will pass the formatting and constitutionality tests. And then if they do, and none have yet, they will almost certainly fail tests relating to national interest, and at the moment economic benefits are high levels on the filter. And clearly Ecuador needs a mining industry, and inexorably the local population is coming around to that view as well, as is the government.
Thanks, Nick. Next question. What are the plans for GGR's 10.6% stake in SolGold? Will it be retained or partially or entirely sold?
Being a key member of the DGR board, I can tell you that it's our intention to hold and husband and look after that interest. We have no interest at all in flicking that out. None.
Thanks. As a management team, do you see any particular near midterm risks aside from COVID that you're looking to mitigate to achieve your goals laid out in the presentation of the next year?
Well, the risks obviously are COVID, copper price risk, gold price risk, financing, and operational capability. Dealing with the last of those first, the operational capability, we are strengthening and demonstrating that we're strengthening our management and operational team in respect of the project and the company, both at a technical level and a financial level. We are, can you still hear me?
We can.
Yeah, good. We are also convinced that the copper price is going to rise, and nearly everybody around the world in the industry that you ask about that is of the same view, and we're starting to see some murmurings in the copper price as well. The gold price has already started to take off, and we think it's going to keep going, so not really worried about that. Sovereign risks, we think the overall economic requirements of Ecuador to generate a new massive contributor to GDP, and that's the mining industry, will underwrite the development of a stable, secure, sustainable and responsible mining industry in Ecuador. We're working very closely with the government, as is Lundin Gold, to ensure that that happens. The other risk, of course, is financing and financeability. Well, we have been aided there by the phenomenon of quantitative easing and the creation by the US alone of some $3 trillion of extra capital slopping around in financial markets. Not much of that has yet seen the light of day, but it's there, and they're now starting to print even more. So interest rates are going to be lower for longer, and that means that there's a vast amount of capital that's looking for a home. The availability of the capital, the spectacular cash flow profile that you can model for Alpala, and we believe the other projects in SolGold will demonstrate the same thing, show that, as I mentioned before, that this is a banker's dream. It's got fast payback. It's got a long life. It's got a very high IRR in the mid to high 20s, and it's got a net present value of somewhere over 4 billion. So, as we're seeing from the interest that's being shown from straight debt providers, streamers, royalty companies, equity participants, in fact, interest from the proprietors of nearly every financing instrument in the industry, we don't believe that financing is going to be a risk for Alpala, and we're starting to see the evidence of that. So, bit by bit, all of these risks are evaporating or receding. And ultimately, we think that the likelihood is that SolGold will be regarded in an even shinier light than it is at the moment.
Thanks, Nick. Next question. What are the key milestones coming that you think might lead to a re-rate in the SolGold share price? You did just describe a few of them.
Yeah, these questions are always a little bit of a worry to answer, because what we think doesn't necessarily mean anything to people who are buyers or ought to be buyers. I mean, we would have thought that the deal with Franco might re-rate us more significantly than it has, but I think people are probably worried about the completion risk given the COVID situation. Well, the COVID situation is diminishing, and we're very confident that the Franco deal will complete. So the Franco deal completing is obviously something that will have a key effect. Completing the pre-feasibility study is something that will have a key effect. Completing the cornerstone bid is something that will have an emerging key effect, because it will make SolGold the only place that you can go to get equity in this project. Although I wouldn't like to be going to Cornerstone to get equity, because unless they can come up with somewhere around 450 million for their share of developing the project, when we get to that stage, there'll be a spot of bother. So that will help us. The other thing that will be good for us is putting in place conditional financing agreements. Now, the guidance that we gave in the Franco announcement should indicate that we are working on a number of large opportunities. In the previous announcement that was put out concerning the progress of the financing activities generally also indicated considerable levels of support that was being generated, particularly by Ingo in the areas of smelters, refiners and traders. So between streamers, royalties, smelters, refiners, traders and so on, we can see about 2 billion coming together. And that's not the whole 2.7 billion, obviously, but it's a long way towards it, and we're not even completed PFS yet. So we're very confident that we will have all of the conditional financing jigsaw pieces all put together when we get to definitive final feasibility study. And the last piece of the jigsaw will be the delivery of the PFS with the permits and the fiscal framework, and then we will have a complete picture, and we will have done it years before anybody else could have achieved the same thing. So, yeah, back to your original question, milestones, completion of Franco, grant of new tenements, drilling results on the exploration tenement areas, completing Cornerstone, completing the PFS, completing the DFS, and having the conditional financing agreements in place. We are some months away from getting to any of those conditional financing pieces, but we're working on it.
Thanks, Nick. We're coming up to an hour 10 of the presentation. I'll do my very best to streamline the questions into just a couple more. One of them here, have BHP or Newcrest formally mentioned a hostile bid may be coming? Otherwise, why hire Citi?
No, they haven't. And the reason that we hire Citi is because we want to be ready and prepared for anybody coming on with a hostile bid. I mean, if you're going to fight a battle, any military commander will tell you this, you make sure that you're well supplied before you even march over the hill. We're simply just making sure that we're well supplied, well supported, and have the necessary resources available and at our fingertips if something like that happens. You don't want to have to scramble and struggle, and only do it after the arrival of an opportunistic aggressive bid. You want to be ready for it, and that's why we hired Citi. They are, in our view, the best in the business, and they're working on a number of angles for us.
Thanks, Nick. Is Agua still a focus, or were the drill results disappointing, and has it been deprioritized?
No, Agua Naga is a fantastic prospect, as is Tandayama, as is Moran, and as is the America anomaly. The reason that we haven't done any more drilling at Agua Naga or gone and tested Moran, Tandayama, or America is because we've got so much value that is evident at Alpala, and still a huge gap between our market capitalisation and the value of the Alpala project, that we're not sure that going and finding anything more at Alpala right at the moment is necessarily going to make that much difference to the share price. We've already got a project that's worth sort of $3 or $4 billion and a market cap of still only 750 million. So, let's get that fishing bag filled first before we try and go and get another one.
Thanks, Nick. There's been a bunch of questions related to the Solomon Islands and Australia project. So let me just sort of summarize into one. Are the Solomon Islands and Australia projects in care and maintenance, or is there ongoing activity there, accepting that Ecuador is a good and obvious focus for the company?
The Australian ones are on care and maintenance. In the Solomon Islands, we are working at ground level on those project areas, particularly in Kuma, where we do see drill targets emerging. We don't have any immediate plans or approved budgets to go drill testing Kuma. And as you say, Ecuador is really our focus at the moment.
Okay, Nick, I think that's pretty good. I think that wraps up most of the questions. A bunch of the ones left, I think, are overlap. So if everyone's good, we want to thank SolGold and all the management team from all the different locations coming in and providing this update for their shareholders. It was our privilege and pleasure at Red Cloud to host them. Any parting words, Nick?
No, other than to very much thank Red Cloud for organising this, the second of our webinars, and there will be many more. Thank you for the support that you provide us. It's very reassuring. To all of the SolGold shareholders, I thank you for your investment in us and your patience. Finding world-class ore bodies for us is a lot easier than taking them through feasibility and ultimately into development. But we are committed to that process because the current market capitalisation of the company is way underneath the value of the project on any analytical basis. So we've got a lot of value to add, and we're working on the various management additions, financial enhancements and capital raisings and so on to quickly and efficiently prosecute the transformation of our power from discovery to development and the advancement of our other exploration projects from idea to discovery. And by doing what we do best, we should add value and hopefully market capitalisation in chunks.
Terrific. And thank you, Nick. With that, everyone, thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.